This is WVOF. You're listening to The Sweep. I'm Cole Townsend, and today I'm joined by my co-host,
Ali Haidar.
And Nick Toledo.
We're back after an 8-month hiatus, and we could not pick a better time to pick things back up. Thanks for joining us.
We really couldn't have. The impeachment trial has started in the Senate. It's the trial in the Senate, not the impeachment trial in the Senate. It's been bugging me for a while. We technically don't have a Senate anymore. When they took the oath to become jurors, there is no more Senate. The Senate has been dissolved. So they're the jury now. And they're doing their thing. You guys have any thoughts on what we've seen the past few days?
I haven't really been paying too much attention to impeachment because of many things, and something we'll talk about soon, but a certain surge going on. But Bolton, I think, is a big bombshell right there, saying that Trump did tie conditions in with the aid, but that's something we didn't know before. I mean, that was kind of evident there. I think, and that's what Republicans kind of knew that. That's why they were kind of angling the spot. Is it wrong for him to do that? So I think that should be interesting. I think Bolton coming on and being a witness should be really interesting, and I can't wait to see it.
To be honest, so with Russiagate, I know people are very cautious after Russiagate to jump into accusing Donald Trump of anything. But this one has always seemed a lot more concrete to me than Russiagate, so I'm not really surprised by anything that's coming out in the trial. This is all par for the course of Donald Trump at this point, and kind of what I expected. I won't get into this for too long, but I will say when Nancy Pelosi, and I know I've talked to you about this on multiple occasions privately, but when Nancy Pelosi held off on sending the articles of impeachment after being drafted to the Senate, I thought that was a brilliant move, because in the same way that Republicans in 2016 were able to get out of letting Barack Obama appoint a Supreme Court pick, she could have done the same thing where, is it legal? Well, technically, yes, it's constitutional to not send over the articles, in which case a trial could never occur. And Democrats, if they were smart, could hold press rallies constantly until the day of the election, saying Donald Trump has been impeached. Why aren't the Republicans letting us have a fair trial? And I think that would have been a good strategy. That being said, she sent over the articles after with holding it for a little while. Wear hair. I'm sure that Donald Trump will likely be acquitted. I'm actually almost 100% positive of it, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, John Bolton has been manipulating the national and international media for the better part of 3 or 4 decades now. I don't know why they still let it happen. He's using impeachment to market his book, which is actually pretty genius. More mad that I didn't think of it first than that he's actually doing it. I think he should testify. That goes without saying. He's still bloodthirsty to take a regime down. He didn't get his war with Iran. He wanted that regime change there. He's going to get one no matter what happens. You can fire him. You can do what you want. He's going to win. I want to talk about Adam Schiff really quickly. He's been doing an amazing job presenting the arguments and giving his speeches, and specifically tailoring his arguments to, I think, the halls of history rather than to a Senate that's most likely going to acquit the president. These speeches that he's been giving during the trial, they're not really tailored to the senators. They're tailored to the history books, and it's really fun to watch. I recommend, tuning into C-SPAN.
I guess one small point on this before we go, I do want to call attention to the Fox News coverage of the impeachment, because what they're doing is honestly quite scary. If any of you guys tuned in to Fox to really see what was going on, they have been showing video footage of the impeachment trial. However, they have, throughout the entire thing, refused to play any audio from it. So you have Fox News pundits talking over about their impressions of it without you being able to experience it at all.
Or them having seen it themselves.
Exactly. Or
they
them
have this really
themselves.
wacky flowchart connecting John Bolton to James Comey to prove that he's a liberal stooge.
It's funny how things have turned, because maybe a few months ago, before Trump fired Bolton, I'm sure Fox News would have ran endless segments defending Bolton against backlash from liberals from across the aisle. It just really shows that Fox News is and like we've said this on the show before in the past, and we all say this in person to other people when we discuss mainstream media. Fox News is nothing more but state propaganda for the Trump administration. There have been moments where they've come out critical of Trump and he's kind of lashed against them, but really, at the end of the day, their support for the president outweighs any mild criticism they have of him. And it's really interesting. I'm just curious to see what happens 20 years from now when the majority of the population that watches Fox News won't be here with us. So
They'll be watching Louder with Crowder. They've all got Jordan Peterson's books. I've been told to check them out. I've heard they'll change my life, teach me how to be a man.
My dad, sometimes I see him watching Jordan B. Peterson and Stefan Molyneux, and I'm always very confused. But, that's great. We've discussed impeachment.
Don't talk to him about Taylor Swift. You might not like where that conversation goes.
I don't even know what that means. But we're going to move on, and I think we should get into Iowa now.
All right, the horse race is picking up in Iowa. Iowa caucus is next Monday. You won't see me. It's nerve-wracking. I think we're all really nervous. A lot of sleepless nights. We are all aboard the polar coaster. 538 is now a full-fledged, it's not a want or anymore, it's a need. It's a full-on necessary addiction in our lives. They've put Biden at 2-5 and Bernie at 3-5 at the top of the field, blowing everyone out of the water. Iowa appears to be a two-person race right now, but even with this neck-and-neck race, you never know what's going to happen. We all got to remember Obama kind of came out of nowhere in 2008 and took it, so anything could still happen.
I guess that means that Amy Klobuchar could come out of, out of left field and really more like right field and really run away with the Iowa caucus. I will say that
Clementum is picking up.
You're right. You're right.
You got to get that Clementum call.
I love your terminology. Your lexicon is just brilliant.
Thank you.
But I do want to point out before passing this topic off to Ali, Bernie Sanders is in really good shape right now. I've got Real Clear Politics pulled up right now. I'm looking at the recent New York Times Siena poll that came out Saturday, January 25th, that has Sanders 25 to Biden 17. So that's Sanders up 7, right? What else is there? There's Iowa Trump versus Biden, where Trump is coming up +2, right? And Iowa Trump versus Sanders. This one's a little bit weird. It's got Trump 48 to Sanders 42.
Whose poll is that?
That's also New York Times Siena. There are plenty of other polls that actually show him beating Trump very handily, but considering the fact that we'll probably get a lot of Bernie bias accusations, I figured I'd show a poll that is not casting Bernie in the best light. But nonetheless, let's keep in mind the fact that I choose that poll specifically to show you that Bernie Sanders has a demographic of people who are not actually conventionally being polled. So he's doing really well with people who are. Imagine the people who are young, who are working class, who are racial minorities, who are typically not represented in polls because they typically do not go out and vote unless they really feel like a candidate means to and has the means to change their lives. So I really do think that we'll see something special when it comes to showing up in Iowa and just in general going into this race.
I think you just jinxed it. You just sunk the entire ship. What I wanted to say really quickly, I was going to say that Bernie has by far the most impressive ground game, with Warren coming at a close second, despite Warren constantly shooting herself in the foot, which is why I wanted to quickly bring up. It wasn't on the schedule. I'm sorry. Did you guys see her interfaith initiative that then got deleted 3 minutes later?
I didn't.
I did. What was it? She had
16 Protestant ministers. She had 1 rabbi and 1 white sensei.
Wow.
Her team deleted it approximately 5 minutes later.
Imams who?
Yeah.
What's that? Gesundheit.
Oh, thank you.
No, it's a disaster. Her campaign has just... I think she is a good candidate. On paper, she's a good candidate. In person, she's a good candidate. I don't know what her staffers are doing. I don't know what's going on there. I can't see that this many consecutive mess-ups are the fault of the candidate themselves. It's the people around you. And what really makes or breaks a campaign at the end of the day is the people that you surround yourself with.
I mean, So, I think right now Bernie Sanders is at such a good point with the Iowa caucus being less than a week away, and the fact that he's just demolishing any poll that's been recently coming out.
Yeah.
When it comes to Warren, Nick, I agree with you that she kind of shot herself in the foot, and that's the irony of this, that Sanders did not have to pick up his finger and do anything to come at Elizabeth Warren. She tried coming out against Sanders by having her campaign leak that claim that he said that no woman could win the presidency, which is completely false. He did not say that. And the fact that she tried getting him on the debate stage 2 days later after she made that claim. And really, I don't know if I agree with you, though, that if it's her, the people that surround her have been kind of leading her campaign astray. I feel like it's a combination of the two. I feel like every day, gradually, Warren has become a candidate less like Bernie and more like Joe Biden.
If the lower in the polls you get, the more desperate you get.
I'm inclined to agree with Ali quite a lot. So, for example, her tacit support for Medicare for All, she entered the race like that. And at that point in time, you don't necessarily have your staff as solidified as you do now, like less than a week away from Iowa, right? So that was something she had from the beginning. But at the same time, Bernie Sanders, who describes himself as a democratic socialist, but more actually pushes for, your Nordic social democracy, Elizabeth Warren was initially talking about democracy at the workplace in a proposed bill of hers, right? And it wasn't a huge part of her campaign, but seeing that was the reason why initially I was a little stuck between whether or not I would choose to support Bernie this go-around or Warren this go-around. But I wholeheartedly agree with Ali. As time went on, she abandoned her support for Medicare for All to the extent that it ever existed. Has never spoken publicly beyond, maybe a Medium post about her, desire to see democracy at the workplace, if that is still the case. Has snuck dark money from her 2018 election, where she was raising money from big corporate donors, into her primary race. Has stated that she's willing to accept big money in the general, and even if it's not for her campaign for the Democratic Party, well, who's it going to, right? Still her. So time and time again, she's moved further to the right, and as she's moved further to the right, she's gone down in the polls. People don't want it.
Yeah, and I mean, her moving further to the right is in part of her feeling that she needed to get pushed there. But that only happened because she started the policy primary almost a year earlier than it normally starts. This entire demise coming straight down to, I think, a really pivotal moment in her campaign was her coming out saying she's not going to do Medicare for All initially. And that announcement that, I'll do it in the third quarter, that sort of lackluster support behind it, she wouldn't have even had to have been talking about it at that point in time had she not started releasing all of this policy from day one. She pushed the policy primary up. Everything that's gone wrong in her campaign has been the fault of the campaign.
All I can know, before we move on, but all I can say about Elizabeth Warren is, I like her less every growing day, and every day she tries to stab Sanders back in the back, and I'm starting to like Andrew Yang a lot more, given the fact that the mainstream media despises him as much as they despise Bernie Sanders, and the fact that, he's pretty grounded, and I feel like he's an outside the establishment candidate. But Elizabeth Warren, we'll have to see where she goes. My only fear is that she'll continue to exacerbate the tensions within the party between the progressives and others if she endorses anyone but Bernie.
Yeah. So quickly before we move on to the next thing, I want to say something that's going to be, I think, pretty unpopular with you guys. I think that the other person I would put on the ticket if I had to choose is Tom Steyer.
We're just going to agree to disagree right now.
Yeah, I see them. They're sharpening their knives across the table from me right now. And I'm going to say why, and it's one thing. I made a pledge on Twitter 3 years ago that I would vote for any candidate that supports ranked choice voting. And I think if we're stuck with one of the rest of them and it comes down to it, the one that's going to give us ranked choice voting, which is kind of a gateway drug into a multi-party system, is probably the candidate to go with, and it's his it's his flagship policy. It's what he's basing his platform off of, and I think that's a pretty impressive thing for him to be going for there.
Well, we have nothing but respect for you, Nick. Tom Story or not, you'll still be on the show. We don't know for how long, though.
God, I'll get my own
That's
employment
good.
papers ready.
All right, I think it's time to move on for sure.
Yeah, okay, so I want to talk about Mayor Pete for a minute. And there are some things that really bother me. I've heard a lot of people recently talking about how his work with and for McKinsey is why you should vote for him. Those interviews are really hard. Someone said to me yesterday, I applied to a firm like that. Those interviews are really hard. That you should vote for him because you got to be really smart to make it through one of those interviews. And I've heard stuff like that. And look, we've all heard the accusations of him raising the average bread price in Canada, which he got mad about in a very fake way in the New York Times interview. But it turns out that the Times actually has a bit of an axe to grind with McKinsey. The Times broke a pretty elaborate story that I won't get to talk about most of it here on McKinsey back in 2018. And the gist of the story is that McKinsey Consulting has a bit of a soft spot for authoritarian governments. Actually, they kind of actively seek them out. They work in China. They've worked with Edragon. They helped Paul Manafort destabilize the Ukraine. They don't have to disclose who they take their money from or how much money they're taking or where they're working. Their last corporate retreat was right near the prison camps in China. They've been busting unions in the States since the Reagan years, it's like, that's nothing new. But the scary part, and what I have to think of is, the person that I'm voting for candidate, if that's how Pete Buttigieg is willing to treat other people, then how is he going to be willing to treat our own people? I don't want a president who sees that big of a difference between an American and a non-American, who sees such a big difference that they're willing to actively work to help oppress another group of people for profit. That just doesn't sit well with me. I can't stomach it. Maybe I'm soft or something. It's just, I don't like that.
I personally don't think that Mayor Pete does see a big difference between an American and a non-American, besides the fact that the non-American could not vote for him. If you look, he really doesn't have a long political history, and he has not had a lot of political responsibility, as his, most considerable position has been being a mayor of a small college town, and he's done that poorly. Look at, the tension and the angst that has grown up between the black community of South Bend, Indiana, and the police force and the mayor. And I'm not just talking about the firing of the black police chief Boykins. I'm also talking about the young boy who, he was black and he was murdered following repeated reports of him being bullied by white classmates. And they really did not try to look into the, motive behind his murder or anything like that. They pressured the mother to have him, buried, fairly quickly, and they did so at the cemetery. There's a cemetery that tends to be plotted for whites and tends to and another one that tends to go to blacks in that town.
Segregated death, that sounds fun.
Fun, just like in life. And he, rushed her into that situation and did not respect the burial process. And let's not forget about all the gentrification. I don't think that he does see a difference between that. So that's all I'll say on the topic.
I mean, the last thing, if you're smart enough to get a job at McKinsey, like this person I talked to yesterday said, you have to be brilliant. And I don't deny that he's a very smart man. But what I'm saying is, if you're smart enough to work at McKinsey, he's also smart enough to know the difference between right and wrong. He's also smart enough to have done some cursory research into who McKinsey was and what they do. He was smart enough to know what was going on there, who he was working for, and the values that he was upholding as a part of their corporate system.
I'm just going to say one thing. I dislike Pete Buttigieg. I will always dislike Pete Buttigieg. I will never vote for Pete Buttigieg. And I can't wait until he drops out of this primary.